Welcome to Old Worlds for Sleep, a place where history becomes a lullaby and forgotten times return to life in soft whispers. Here we journey into the past, not with dates and dry lessons, but with sights, sounds, and feelings that surround you like a dream. Tonight, we step into the grand yet treacherous halls of Victorian England, a world of elegance and invention, but also of hidden dangers that crept silently through every home. From arsenic wallpaper to the flicker of gas lamps, from corsets that stole the breath to medicines laced with opium, the Victorians lived among beauty laced with peril. So, find your quiet space, settle under your blankets, and let your body grow heavy with rest. Together, we'll drift into another century, exploring a house both dazzling and dangerous, where every detail tells a story. This is the world of yesterday, reimagined for dreams tonight. You wake in darkness. Not the soft darkness you know from your modern bedroom, broken by the faint glow of streetlights outside or the blinking red of an electronic clock. This is a darkness that feels alive, thick, heavy, almost pressing against your eyes. For a moment you lie still, disoriented, certain you must still be dreaming. But then the sensations rush in, and they are too vivid, too alien to dismiss as sleep. The mattress beneath you is lumpy and unyielding. Something sharp presses into your back, and when you shift your weight, the surface crackles faintly as though filled with paper. You reach down, fingers brushing against coarse, ticking fabric. Horsehair. Straw. This is no memory foam or spring coil mattress but a Victorian bed, stuffed with whatever materials could be crammed inside. The air itself feels strange. It is colder, heavier, infused with scents you can't quite place. Coal smoke, wood polish, old wool, and something faintly musty that reminds you of attics and forgotten trunks. When you exhale, a thin cloud escapes your lips. Your bedroom at home never froze like this overnight. You push back the layers of heavy covers, blankets, quilts, rough wool piled one on top of another. They are warm but suffocating, weighted like a leaden hand pressing you down. The sheets underneath are coarse, nothing like the soft cotton or microfiber you're accustomed to. Somewhere in the house, wood creaks and you freeze, every nerve alight. Then you hear it, footsteps. Light but deliberate, approaching along a wooden corridor. A faint glow appears beneath the door, a candle's flicker. The door opens with a long groan of wood and iron hinges. In steps a young woman dressed in black, a white apron tied at her waist, a small brass candlestick trembling faintly in her hand. Her face is pale, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She lowers her gaze and dips a curtsy. "Good morning, ma'am," she says softly. "It is 6. Shall I light your fire?" Before you can form words, she is already moving toward the fireplace. You watch as she kneels, laying kindling and coal with practiced efficiency. Her hands move quickly but carefully, striking flint until sparks catch on the dry wood. Within moments, flames lick upward, throwing warmth into the freezing room. The flicker illuminates the chamber around you. Carved oak furniture, patterned wallpaper, heavy curtains drawn tight against the morning light. Everything is ornate, detailed, unmistakably 19th century. The maid glances back at you. "Cook says breakfast will be at 8, ma'am. Will you be requiring a bath?" A bath. The word should bring comfort, but here it carries an entirely different meaning. You imagine servants hauling steaming buckets of water up endless flights of stairs, pouring them into a tin tub dragged into your room, waiting discreetly in the corner as you wash. No modern privacy. No convenience of taps and plumbing. Just labor, awkwardness, and exposure. You swallow. "No thank you," you manage. "Just water for washing." She nods briskly, rising and disappearing. Minutes later she returns with a porcelain pitcher balanced in one hand and a basin in the other. Steam curls from the water, filling the room with a damp heat. She places it on the washstand, lays out a towel, and steps back, awaiting further instruction. "That will be all," you say quickly. She curtsies again and withdraws, closing the door softly behind her. Alone now, you swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floor is bare wood, icy against your feet. You wince as the cold shoots upward through your bones. Only a few scattered rugs break the expanse, doing little to soften the shock. You move to the washstand, staring into the small mirror above it. The glass is warped, wavy, reflecting your face in strange distortions. You hardly recognize yourself in this foreign light. You splash water on your face, gasping at its heat. A bar of yellow soap sits nearby, smelling sharply of lye. Its caustic odor clings to your skin even after rinsing. The fire's warmth is slowly spreading through the room, chasing away the frost, but the air remains heavy, scented with coal dust and linseed oil. When you return to the bed, you notice clothes neatly laid out on a nearby chair. Undergarments, petticoats, corset, and a dress. Each piece more complicated than the last, each demanding effort and assistance to don properly. Already you sense the burden of simply existing in this world, where even rising from bed is a project requiring servants, rituals, and endurance. As you sit staring at the garments, a realization settles like the weight of those heavy blankets. You are not merely a guest here. You are expected to live this life. And the day has only just begun. The fire crackles in the grate, but the chill lingers. Even in this fine house, the air bites at your skin, seeping in through windows and uninsulated walls. You reach for the pitcher of hot water left by the maid and pour it into the porcelain basin. Steam rises in delicate curls, warming your face. The contrast is sharp. Your fingers sting with cold, then flush pink as they touch the heat. You dip a cloth, wring it out, and press it against your cheeks. The sensation is almost shocking. This is no shower, no modern stream of water cascading endlessly at the turn of a knob. This is labor condensed into a single bowl. Water heated in the kitchen, carried up flights of stairs, offered sparingly. Every drop has weight, effort, cost. You lift the yellow bar of soap again, noticing its hardness. It bites at your skin with its caustic smell. A few suds form, rough and thin, sliding across your hands. When you rinse, the water clouds faintly, leaving behind a residue that clings to your skin. You think of your gentle modern soaps, scented with lavender or citrus, moisturizing instead of stripping. Here, cleanliness comes at the expense of comfort. Beside the basin sits a toothbrush, wooden handle, bristles dark and stiff. You hesitate before lifting it. The maid has placed a tin of tooth powder nearby. The lid bears a neat printed label, its ornate Victorian typography promising whitening and fresh breath. You open it, inhale the faint mineral smell. Chalk perhaps, maybe even ground bone. You dip the brush, then scrub, the bristles harsh against your gums. It is both too much and not enough, scraping without the satisfying freshness of your own toothpaste. When you spit into the bowl, the foam looks faintly gray, and you wonder what trace elements now cling to your enamel. The chamber pot waits discreetly beneath the bed. You pull it out, its porcelain cool to the touch. Practical, yes, but humiliating in its presence. There is no private bathroom attached to this grand bedroom, no lock on a door to guarantee solitude. You think of the maid who might be expected to empty it later, the indignity of her task hidden under layers of propriety. Even the simplest bodily functions are complicated here, wrapped in class and labor. You glance toward the chair where your clothing waits. The garments seem to regard you in return, silent and expectant. Undergarments first. A chemise, thin cotton meant to protect your skin from the harsher fabrics layered above. Petticoats follow, one after another, their weight gathering around your waist. Already you feel bulkier, constrained, your movements slowed. Then comes the corset. It lies innocently enough, a long, stiff garment lined with stays of whalebone or steel. You lift it, marvel at its heaviness. How could anyone wear this all day? You wrap it around yourself, fumbling with the laces. It is impossible to manage alone, not properly. You pull at the strings, tightening until the garment grips your torso like a vice. Your breast shortens, your ribs squeezed. The pressure is alien, intrusive, forcing your posture upright, shoulders back, waist compressed. You imagine what it would feel like fully laced by an experienced hand, reduced to the fashionable 18-inch waist prized by society. Internal organs shifted, lungs restricted, ribs bent inward over time. All for beauty. All for respectability. You pause, resting your hands on the washstand. The fire warms your back, the corset tightens your chest, and the room spins faintly. How many women fainted simply from standing too long in these devices? And yet, fainting itself became a social performance, expected and accepted. The corset is not merely clothing. It is a symbol of control, of discipline, over the body, over society, over women themselves. Layer by layer, you dress yourself as best you can. Stockings, garters, boots laced tight. A bodice, a skirt, each fastened with more buttons than you can easily manage. Your fingers ache from the small, stubborn closures. By the time you finish, you feel encased rather than clothed. Every movement is deliberate now, every breath measured. The garments define your space, your posture, your possibilities. You look once more into the warped glass of the mirror. The figure staring back seems both familiar and foreign, your face above an unfamiliar body. The corset narrows your waist, lifts your chest, forces your spine into rigid alignment. The layers of fabric blur the contours of your figure into a bell-shaped silhouette. It is you, yet it is also someone else. A Victorian woman bound by fashion and expectation. The firelight flickers across the wallpaper, illuminating its intricate floral pattern. You wonder again at the materials hidden in its dyes, the invisible particles that might be rising even now as the heat of the fire warms the air. You feel caught between two prisons, the visible prison of clothing and the invisible prison of the environment itself. Both beautiful, both dangerous. Somewhere below, a bell chimes. The household is waking. Footsteps echo faintly through the floorboards. The rhythm of the day has begun. You take a deep breath, or as deep as the corset allows, and prepare to step beyond your room into the rest of the house. Whatever awaits, it will not be simple. The last button slips into place with a reluctant tug. You step back from the mirror, your breathing shallow beneath the corset's grip. The transformation is startling. What had been a loose bundle of cloth on the chair has now become a complete Victorian ensemble. Heavy skirts fall to the floor, brushing your ankles. The bodice fits snug across your chest, its stiff seams dictating posture and movement. There's no casual shrugging in this attire, no slouching or sprawling. The clothing itself insists on propriety. You test a step. The fabric swishes with weight, dragging slightly along the wooden boards. Already, you imagine what filth it will gather once you leave the confines of the bedroom. Soot, dust, manure from the streets. A parasite of fabric collecting the detritus of Victorian life. The maid returns quietly as if summoned by your thoughts. She eyes your incomplete attire with professional neutrality. Without a word, she retrieves gloves, a bonnet, and a shawl, laying them carefully on the bed. These finishing touches are not optional. A Victorian lady would never appear before family, or worse, visitors, without being properly dressed. Even in private, standards bind tighter than corset laces. You allow her to fasten what you cannot. The stubborn hooks down your back, the final tightening of stays, the precise placement of folds. She steps back, approving, and gives a small curtsy before slipping from the room again. You are left standing stiffly in the center of the chamber, trapped in someone else's body, someone else's century. You glance at the wallpaper. In the shifting light of the fire, the deep green pattern glimmers almost invitingly. At first glance, it's beautiful, curling vines, lush leaves, stylized blossoms. Then you remember the name whispered in history books, Shelley's green. Arsenic bound in pigment. Paris green, they sometimes called it, after the city that adored it. The color that promised elegance but delivered death. It wasn't immediate, of course. No one painted a room and fell dead the next day. It was slower, subtler. The damp air loosened particles, the heat of the fire coaxed poison into breath. Families lived their lives surrounded by it, never suspecting the headaches, nausea, or sudden illnesses were blooming from their own walls. Children sickened in nurseries papered with vibrant green. Dinner guests dined beneath curtains shedding invisible dust into their food. Servants cleaning the rooms handled fabrics that could leach toxins into their skin. You step closer to the wall, half horrified, half fascinated. The green almost glows, an unnatural brightness in the dim room. You imagine reaching out to trace the pattern, but stop yourself, heart pounding at the thought of touching poison disguised as beauty. How many Victorian men and women admired these very patterns, proud of their modern taste, blind to the danger curling just beneath the surface? The fire crackles behind you. You turn and notice the heavy drapes framing the window. They too shimmer faintly with threads of green. Were they dyed with arsenic pigment as well? Perhaps. The Victorians adored uniformity of style. Walls, drapes, upholstery, all coordinated, all in fashion's favored shade. It was not enough to own fine things. One had to own the right things, the colors whispered about in society columns, praised in decorating manuals. Beauty became obligation even when it carried invisible death. You retreat toward the washstand, suddenly conscious of the air you breathe. Each lungful feels suspect. The corset restricts your ribs, making each breath shallow, but perhaps that is a blessing. Less air drawn in, less poison consumed. You shake your head, almost laughing at the absurdity of the thought. Yet it is not absurd. It is history. Thousands of Victorians lived and died surrounded by beauty that betrayed them. Your gaze falls upon the vanity table. Small bottles and jars crowd its surface. Powders, creams, rouges. Their labels promise radiance, refinement, beauty. But you know better. White lead for a pale complexion. Belladonna drops to dilate the eyes. Mercury-based rouge for a delicate flush. Each cosmetic a bargain struck between vanity and health. The price: poisoned skin, failing eyesight, trembling hands. You pick up a small pot, open it, and recoil from the acrid smell. The substance within gleams faintly, almost metallic. You set it down quickly, wiping your fingers on the towel as if contact alone could seep death into your skin. Beauty in this house is a labyrinth of traps. Every object is both ornament and threat. The clock on the mantel strikes 7. The chime echoes through the chamber, low and resonant. You startle, realizing you've spent half an hour simply navigating the act of dressing and noticing your surroundings. Outside the bedroom door, the house stirs. Servants bustle along back corridors. Somewhere below, pans clang faintly, signaling breakfast preparation. A carriage rattles past in the street outside. The Victorian day is beginning in earnest. You smooth the folds of your skirt, gather the courage to face whatever lies beyond this room, and rest your gloved hand on the door handle. The green wallpaper seems to watch you as you leave, whispering its poisonous secrets into the morning air. The hallway greets you with silence, broken only by the faint pop and hiss of the gas lamps along the walls. Their glow is weak in the early morning light seeping through curtained windows, but it is enough to reveal the grandeur around you. Ornate wallpaper stretches upward, dark green vines twisting across the walls, gold accents woven into the design. At first glance, it feels rich, elegant, timeless. Then the realization returns: arsenic green. The very air here may be laced with poison. You pause, hand resting on the polished banister. The wood is smooth, worn by years of touch. For a moment you imagine the countless people who have walked these stairs before you, family members, guests, servants, all breathing day after day the invisible dust that seeped from these decorative walls. The Victorians had no idea. Headaches, nausea, mysterious skin rashes. They blamed drafts, bad air, or nervous disorders. No one suspected that beauty itself was betraying them. You move cautiously along the hall, the boards creaking softly beneath your boots. The air feels heavy, almost sweet. Whether it is suggestion or reality, you can't be sure. The wallpaper seems to shimmer faintly where sunlight brushes it. That eerie glow was precisely what made this color so popular. It looked alive, vibrant, impossibly modern in an age hungry for innovation. Fashion magazines praised it, decorators insisted upon it, and entire parlors were papered in the deadly shade. At the end of the hallway you pause before a window. The curtains here are drawn back slightly, and light floods in, illuminating dust motes dancing lazily in the air. You raise your candle to the curtain fabric, tracing its green threads with your eyes. Again that telltale shade. If the wallpaper was poisonous, so too were these draperies. When sunlight struck them, when dampness seeped into their folds, arsenic could leach free. Families sat beneath them, inhaling the unseen fumes, praising the beauty of their modern decor. A faint sound breaks your reverie. The soft swish of skirts. A maid appears at the far end of the hall, arms full of linens. She dips a quick curtsy before disappearing down a side corridor. You watch her go, thinking about how servants, more than anyone, would have borne the brunt of these hazards. Cleaning, dusting, scrubbing, each task releasing invisible toxins. Chapped hands from lye soap, lungs lined with arsenic powder. Their labor kept the house shining while slowly poisoning them. You descend a short flight of stairs, one hand gripping the banister tightly. The steps are narrow, uneven. Another hidden danger. In wealthy homes, the main staircase was built wide, sweeping, perfect for display. But the back stairs, those meant for servants, were built cheaply, corners cut where guests would never see. A single misstep here could send someone tumbling, bones broken, lives ruined. And yet the house demanded these hidden stairways, demanded efficiency from those who moved silently in its shadows. At the landing, a faint draft carries another odor, sharp, chemical. Yes. You glance at the lamp beside you, its flame steady but faintly hissing. Gas lamps transformed Victorian homes, offering light at the turn of a key. But they also carried unseen threats. Leaks that suffocated families in their sleep, explosions from faulty pipes, fires sparked by careless hands. You imagine lying in bed, drowsy with a headache, never realizing the air itself was killing you. A cough escapes your throat, sharp and unexpected. You cover your mouth, suddenly uneasy. Perhaps it is only the cold dust in the air, or perhaps your imagination has run ahead of you. Still, you cannot shake the thought that every breath here is a gamble. The Victorians lived surrounded by killers they could not name. Poison woven into wallpaper, gas seeping from lamps, chemicals hidden in food and drink. You push open a door and step into another room. This one is smaller, more intimate, a sitting room meant for private hours. Again, the walls bloom with green. Here, in the morning light, the wallpaper almost dazzles. It is beautiful. That is what makes it so insidious. You imagine guests gathered here, complimenting the taste of the household, never suspecting that their afternoon tea was accompanied by invisible toxins. A writing desk sits against the far wall. On its surface lies a stack of calling cards, each embossed with names and elegant script. Evidence of society's rituals, the endless cycle of visits and obligations that structured Victorian life. You pick one up, turning it between your fingers. Even this small rectangle might contain hidden dangers. Some calling cards of the era were dyed or printed with arsenical inks. Even the ink that carried a person's name could carry poison. You set the card down quickly, wiping your gloved hands on your skirts. The gloves are thin, but perhaps they provide some barrier. In this house, nothing feels safe, not even simple paper. The clock strikes the half hour. You startle, realizing how long you've lingered among these dangerous walls. Somewhere below, the smell of breakfast drifts upward. Bacon, bread, coffee. Your stomach growls despite the tension coiling in your chest. Hunger battles with unease. You turn from the shimmering wallpaper, from the gas lamps and arsenic threads, and make your way toward the grand staircase. The green walls seem to follow you as you go, whispering softly in silence. Beautiful, deadly, inescapable. The scent of food grows stronger as you descend the main staircase. The banister gleams under your hand, polished wood reflecting the faint flicker of gaslight. Unlike the narrow servants' stairs, this staircase is broad, sweeping, made to impress visitors with grandeur and wealth. At the bottom, a thick carpet muffles your steps. You pass through the entrance hall, its curtains drawn heavy against the morning light, and follow the aroma of bacon and bread. A maid appears as if anticipating your arrival. She gestures you into a smaller, cozier room, a morning room rather than the formal dining hall. The table is already laid with silver dishes, porcelain plates, and delicate cups. Steam curls upward from covered serving dishes, mingling with the warm crackle of a small fire in the grate. You hesitate, taking in the display. The meal looks abundant, almost excessive. Eggs scrambled pale yellow, bacon crisp, sausages arranged neatly on a platter. Toast stacked high beside small pots of jam and marmalade. A silver pot of coffee sends out tendrils of bitter fragrance. There is even fish, lightly smoked, and muffins waiting under a linen cloth to keep them warm. You sit, and almost immediately a maid appears at your elbow. Her hands are red and cracked, evidence of long hours spent in scalding water and caustic soap. She pours coffee into your cup with practiced precision. "Will you take milk, ma'am?" she asks softly. The question catches in your throat. You glance at the small jug waiting beside the coffee pot. Milk, so simple, so harmless in your world. But here, in this Victorian home, you hesitate. Pasteurization is decades away. Milk is often adulterated, thinned with water, purified with borax to mask spoilage. Thousands of children die every year from drinking what should sustain them. You shake your head quickly. Black, thank you. You lift the cup to your lips. The coffee is dark, almost inky, bitter enough to make you cough. Strong, yes, but not pure. You remember that Victorian coffee was often stretched with burnt sugar, chicory, or even ground acorns. Sometimes iron filings were mixed in to mimic the look of premium beans. You set the cup down carefully, unsure whether it is better to drink or to abstain. The maid lifts a silver cover, revealing sausages gleaming in their own fat. Your stomach growls, but you hesitate again. Meat here is not inspected, not regulated. A sausage might contain pork, or it might contain whatever scraps the butcher swept from his floor. Fillers like starch, rusk, even chalk were common. Some sausages were bulked with rotten meat disguised under spices. You look away, appetite shrinking. Instead, you reach for toast. The bread is white and neat, its crust thin. A luxury, wheat bread was costly compared to coarse brown loaves. But the whiteness makes you suspicious. Bakers often added alum or chalk to create this appearance, substances that irritated the stomach and weakened the body. You break off a piece, nibble cautiously. It tastes bland but harmless enough. Jam seems safer. You spread a thin layer across your toast. Sweetness bursts on your tongue, comforting, familiar. But even here danger lurks. Adulterated jams sometimes contained red lead for color or bulked out with cheap fillers. You chew slowly, swallowing with more hope than certainty. The maid hovers. "Would you like fish, ma'am?" she offers. You glance at the smoked herring lying on a porcelain plate. It glistens, tempting, but you imagine the smokehouse where it was cured, the flies, the lack of refrigeration. You decline politely. "Just toast will do." She nods and withdraws. Your gaze lingers on her hands again, chapped to the point of rawness. What chemicals has she touched already today? Soap laced with lye, polish mixed with ammonia, scalding buckets of coal-dusted water. Every mark on her skin tells a story of silent suffering. Servants bore the hidden costs of Victorian households, the cracked hands, the bent backs, the shortened lives. Their pain polished the silver, scrubbed the floors, and made these meals possible. You glance around the morning room as you eat. The wallpaper here is floral, thankfully not green, but who knows what dyes it contains. The chairs are upholstered in rich fabric, stuffed with horsehair. Every surface glitters with ornaments, china figurines, silver picture frames, delicate vases. The Victorians loved their clutter, their things. Each object is beautiful, but each could hide hazards. Even the china cup in your hand might be glazed with lead. Your appetite fades. You sip at the bitter coffee again, its warmth welcome against the morning chill. Through the window you see a gardener at work, bent over the flower beds. He scatters powder across the soil. Arsenic-based insecticide, perhaps. Paris green was as popular in gardens as on walls. It killed beetles, but it also seeped into the soil and poisoned the air. Beauty purchased with slow death. You lean back in your chair, suddenly weary. It has been less than an hour since you left your room, and already you have faced poison in the walls, poison in the food, poison in the very air. Every act, washing, dressing, eating, feels like a negotiation with danger. The maid returns. "Will you be receiving visitors this morning, ma'am?" she asks. On a small silver tray she carries 2 calling cards, names neatly printed. Your heart tightens. Visitors. Strangers. Victorian social rituals you do not yet understand. You shake your head quickly. "Not today." "Very good, ma'am." She curtsies and slips away. You set down your cup, staring at the last crumbs of adulterated bread on your plate. Outside, the gardener straightens, lifting his head to the gray sky. A carriage rattles past, hooves striking sparks on the cobblestones. The city is awake, alive, moving forward. And you, caught in the midst of it, feel a gnawing question in your chest. How did they survive this? How did anyone? You sit quietly in the morning room, the bitter taste of Victorian coffee still lingering on your tongue. The clink of dishes and muffled footsteps drift from the hall beyond. Curious, you rise, smoothing the folds of your heavy skirt, and step into the corridor. The house is waking fully now. Somewhere above, floorboards creak with movement. Somewhere below, the dull thump of coal being shoveled into scuttles echoes upward. The sound draws you down a narrow passage at the back of the house. It is darker here, colder, the elegance of polished wood and fine wallpaper fading into plain plaster and bare boards. A single lamp flickers weakly against the gloom. This is no place for guests, no place for show. This is the servants' domain, hidden behind baize doors and sharp social boundaries. You descend a narrow staircase, each step steep and uneven. The smell of damp mingles with smoke and soap. At the bottom you find yourself in a hallway bustling with activity. Young maids hurry past with armfuls of linens. A scullery maid no older than 12 bends over a heavy bucket, struggling to carry it toward a sink. Her face is red with effort, her small hands already cracked and raw from constant immersion in water and lye. She does not look up as she passes. To acknowledge you might risk reprimand. You pause by the scullery. The sight makes your chest tighten. A girl kneels at a massive stone sink, sleeves rolled high, scrubbing at a pan with harsh soap until her skin reddens. Steam rises from the water, clouding the cold air. The room smells strongly of fat, ash, and the metallic tang of wet iron. Her hands move in a rhythm of endless repetition, scraping, rinsing, scalding. This is her world from dawn until long after dusk. Hours bent over water, lungs filled with damp air, fingers raw and bleeding. Laundry waits in great heaps nearby, sheets, towels, clothing, all marked with the day's grime. Flat irons, each weighing several pounds, rest beside the range. They must be heated until scorching, then pressed across damp fabric. One slip, one moment of carelessness, and the maid's skin could sear, blistering instantly. The laundry maid moves steadily, face flushed, sweat darkening the edges of her cap. She does not pause even as she lifts irons heavy enough to strain her wrists. Further along the corridor, the cook's booming voice carries from the kitchen. She stands before a massive black range, its fire roaring, its iron doors radiating intense heat. Copper pots dangle overhead, catching the light from the flames. The smell of grease, smoke, and boiling broth fills the air. Her arms are thick, her movements sure, but even she is not safe. Burns and scalds are inevitable when working with fire, boiling fat, and heavy iron. A kitchen accident could cripple a servant, yet there was little recourse, no insurance, no protection. A boy slips past you, a coal scuttle balanced awkwardly in his arms. He cannot be more than 8 or 9. His clothes hang loose on his thin frame, smudged with black dust. He disappears into a side passage, returning moments later with the scuttle empty and his face darker with soot. His lungs, you realize, are filling each day with coal dust. What future could such a body endure? The rhythm of the servants' hall is relentless. Bells ring faintly overhead. One for the drawing room, another for the master's study, another still for the ladies' chamber. Each bell corresponds to a room, each tone a command. At once, a footman rises from a bench, straightening his jacket before disappearing upstairs. A housemaid grabs her duster and scurries away. Their lives are dictated by these bells, by the unseen hands that ring them. You notice how pale they look, how stooped their shoulders, how their eyes avoid yours. These are the hidden engines of the house, the bodies that keep fires lit, floors scrubbed, meals served. And yet they remain invisible. Guests never see their blistered hands or smell the soap that clings to their skin. Society praises the elegance of the dinner table, the sparkle of crystal, the neatness of linens. But all of that is bought with suffering carried silently in these narrow passages. Your gaze lingers on the youngest maid, still bent over her basin. She pauses to rub her hands together, wincing at the pain of cracked skin. Her knuckles bleed faintly. Still, she plunges her hands back into the water. What choice does she have? A servant's wage barely covered survival. To refuse was to starve. A bell rings again, sharper this time. The servants snap to motion. The cook wipes her brow with the back of her hand and begins stirring a pot with renewed force. The laundry maid swaps out one iron for another, lifting it with both hands despite the heat. The scullery girl hauls another bucket toward the sink. None pause, none complain. The house demands and they obey. You retreat, heart heavy. The splendor of the rooms above rests squarely on the exhaustion below. For every glittering chandelier, a dozen hands polish brass. For every fine meal, a cook stands scorched by fire. For every cup of coffee, a child hauls coal until his lungs ache. Back upstairs, the hallway greets you with silence once more. You glance at your gloved hands, smooth, unscarred, and feel a pang of guilt. How easily wealth concealed suffering. How invisible the burden carried by those who served. The house above is beautiful. The house below is brutal. And both are necessary to sustain this Victorian illusion of perfection. The maid returns mid-morning with a walking costume neatly arranged over her arm. The air is fine today, ma'am. Would you care for a turn in the park? She asks, her tone respectful but firm, as if walking is less a choice than a duty. Victorians considered fresh air essential to health, even if the air itself was thick with soot and smoke. You nod, eager to escape the oppressive interior with its hidden killers. The process of dressing once more is exhausting. Corset laces tighten around your ribs, forcing shallow breaths. Petticoats, bustle, gloves, hat. Layer upon layer separates your body from the outside world. At last, parasol in hand, you step into the entrance hall. The heavy front door creaks open, and the world of Victorian England spills before you. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Coal smoke hangs in the air like a permanent fog, acrid and stinging in the throat. Horse manure mingles with damp earth, creating a pungent undercurrent. The air is cold but not clean. Every breath carries particles of soot that will cling to your lungs long after the walk is over. The street bustles with activity. A handsome cab rattles past, the horse's hooves striking sparks against the cobblestones. Its driver, wrapped in a heavy coat, flicks his whip lazily. Another carriage, larger and more ornate, follows behind, its wheels spattering mud onto the skirts of pedestrians too slow to move aside. Crossing the street here is a matter of timing and courage. No signals, no right-of-way, just the chaotic negotiation of man, beast, and wheel. On the far side, a group of children play with hoops, their laughter carried faintly through the smoky air. Yet even their play is shadowed by danger. Their clothes are ragged, their shoes worn thin. Disease lingers in every crowded alley, every contaminated water pump. You recall the cholera outbreaks that swept through cities like invisible fire, killing thousands in days. The children's cheeks are bright with cold, but you wonder how many will live to adulthood. Vendors line the street, their cries competing for attention. A flower seller offers bundles of violets, their scents struggling against the coal smoke. A man with a handcart hawks oysters, cheap and plentiful in this era but often harvested from polluted waters. Another vendor sells sweets dusted with bright colors, likely containing lead or mercury-based dyes. They shine like jewels but carry poison in their beauty. You notice how women move carefully along the pavements, skirts lifted just enough to avoid the muck but not so high as to cause scandal. Long skirts act like sponges, dragging through filth, carrying bacteria and chemicals back into the pristine homes. Parasols bob above heads, not for rain but for sun, preserving pale skin from tanning that would suggest outdoor labor. Appearance is armor here. A sudden shout makes you turn. A man stumbles in the street, narrowly avoiding the wheels of a passing cart. His face is gaunt, his clothes threadbare. An opium addict, perhaps, or simply one of the countless laborers broken by long hours and meager wages. In Victorian cities, the line between survival and ruin was razor thin. For every elegant townhouse, dozens of cramped tenements festered nearby, unseen by polite society. Your maid hovers close, anxious. "Best not to linger, ma'am," she murmurs. You realize that even walking has invisible rules. Which streets are proper, which parks respectable, which alleys forbidden. A lady alone is vulnerable, not just to gossip but to real danger. You continue toward the park, parasol shielding your face from a watery sun. The park itself is a relief. Gravel paths curve between winter-bare trees. Gentlemen stroll with canes. Mothers push prams with infants swaddled against the cold. It looks idyllic at first, but even here dangers lurk. Milk sellers wander the paths, offering warm drinks from pails. You remember the truth. Victorian milk was often diluted with water from contaminated sources, or adulterated with borax to mask spoilage. A cup of milk here could mean death for a child. At the edge of the path, a gardener tends a bed of roses with a hand sprayer. The greenish liquid catches the light. Paris green, arsenic repurposed as insecticide. He breathes the mist without a thought, his lungs absorbing poison with every breath. Children run nearby, their shoes scattering soil laced with the same toxic dust. The beauty of the garden hides its venom. As you walk, you begin to see Victorian life with sharper eyes. The grand houses, the polished carriages, the carefully dressed men and women, all of it is built on fragile foundations. A slip on the cobblestones, a swallow of tainted milk, a breath of poisoned air could undo it all. Danger is not hidden here. It is everywhere, woven into the very fabric of daily life. Your maid signals that it is time to return. The winter sun is dipping, and the streets are no place for a lady after dusk. Already, gas lamps sputter to life, their flickering light casting long shadows. Beautiful, yes, but also treacherous. Gas leaks could suffocate an entire household before morning. As you re-enter the house, shedding parasol and gloves, you feel both relieved and unsettled. Outside, the city is alive, vibrant, and full of danger. Inside, the house is quiet, elegant, and equally deadly. In this Victorian world, there is nowhere truly safe. The drawing room is warm when you return, a welcome contrast to the cold streets outside. A fire crackles cheerfully in the grate, its glow reflecting in polished brass and gilt frames. At first glance, the room feels safe, cozy even, filled with upholstered chairs, heavy curtains, and shelves of books. Yet, after your walk through Victorian streets, you can't help but look at it differently. Every object, every comfort might conceal a danger. The air is thick with the smell of coal smoke and beeswax polish. You sink into a velvet armchair, grateful to be off your feet, but the fabric pricks faintly against your skin. Velvet in this period was often treated with dyes that included arsenic or mercury. The brilliant sheen that Victorians adored came at a cost invisible to the eye. How many guests over tea inhaled toxins without realizing? A maid enters silently with a tray, setting down a silver teapot and delicate china cups. The tea steams invitingly, its aroma rich and familiar. You lift the cup, comforted by the ritual. But memory intrudes. Tea leaves adulterated with iron filings or dried with Prussian blue to enhance their color. Even something as simple as tea might not be what it seemed. You take a cautious sip anyway, the warmth soothing against the chill that lingers in your chest. The room itself is a monument to Victorian taste. Every surface is occupied. Porcelain figurines, decorative boxes, stacks of books, photographs in ornate frames. The clutter is charming but also dangerous. Many pigments used in printing photographs and bindings contain toxic metals. Some leather-bound books were treated with arsenical dyes for their brilliant green covers. A small library could double as a poison cabinet. Your eyes wander to the wallpaper. It's not the dreaded emerald green you saw earlier, but a softer blue patterned with cream-colored vines. Still, you can't help but wonder what chemicals produced those colors. Lead, arsenic, mercury, all were common in pigments of the era. When the wallpaper grew damp, tiny particles could flake into the air, invisible but harmful with every breath. The gas lamps flicker overhead, hissing faintly. Their glow adds a golden warmth to the room, but you remember the truth. Gas leaks were common. Carbon monoxide could seep silently into the air, lulling entire families into sleep from which they never woke. Even now, the faint ache at your temples makes you wonder, is it fatigue or the first sign of gas poisoning? On a side table sits a glass dome protecting a delicate arrangement of stuffed birds. Their plumage gleams with brilliant blues and greens as though captured mid-flight. Taxidermy was a Victorian obsession, a way of bringing exotic beauty indoors. But the methods used were brutal. Arsenic soap rubbed into feathers and skins, mercury salts to preserve color. The beauty on display is literally preserved with poison. Beside the birds rests a small cabinet of curiosities. Seashells, fossils, a preserved butterfly collection pinned neatly under glass. It looks harmless, scholarly even, but you know better now. Arsenic and mercury were used to prepare many specimens. Handling them, even just dusting the case, could expose the unsuspecting maid to invisible danger. You notice a small pile of letters and invitations on another table. Their elegant inked script is mesmerizing, curling and flowing across creamy paper. But Victorian ink often contained acidic compounds that corroded paper and skin. The letters smell faintly metallic, a reminder that even communication carried hidden risks. The room grows warmer as the fire burns brighter. You lean back, lulled by the gentle tick of the mantel clock. Yet even timepieces held dangers. Clock faces were sometimes decorated with luminous paint made from radium in later years, or mercury in earlier ones. The ticking comfort might mask another silent hazard. You rise and walk slowly to the window. The heavy curtains are drawn back just enough to let in the pale afternoon light. Their fabric is plush, patterned with intricate designs. You brush your fingers along the folds and instantly regret it. Many Victorian textiles were dyed with chemicals that could irritate the skin or worse. Even the dust they shed might be hazardous. The elegance that drapes the window could also drape you in poison. For all its beauty, the drawing room feels claustrophobic now. The very objects meant to signal wealth and refinement seem like traps. You imagine the ladies of the house gathering here for tea, gossiping over fashion and society, unaware that every breath, every touch carried unseen risks. A maid appears at your elbow, asking if you will be receiving visitors this afternoon. You glance at the calling cards on the silver tray she carries. Names inked in careful script, silent reminders of a social world governed by endless rules. To accept or decline a visit is not just a choice, it's a negotiation of status, respectability, and reputation. Even social customs feel perilous here, though in a different way than arsenic dyes or gas leaks. You decline politely and the maid withdraws. Alone again, you sink back into the armchair. The fire crackles, shadows dance across the wallpaper, and the dangers settle into invisibility once more. This is the paradox of the Victorian home. Comfort wrapped around peril, beauty concealing poison, rituals disguising risk. You close your eyes briefly, listening to the steady rhythm of the mantel clock. A strange calm steals over you. You cannot escape the dangers of this world, but you can begin to understand them. Perhaps that is what survival meant in Victorian times. Not the absence of danger, but learning to live with it, to find beauty in spite of it. The house grows quieter as the afternoon stretches on. Curiosity draws you once again to the upper floor, to the room that feels most alive with both promise and peril. The nursery. The door stands half open, and you push it gently, stepping into a space designed for innocence but shadowed by dangers invisible to the Victorian eye. At first glance, it is charming. Sunlight streams through lace curtains, illuminating pastel wallpaper decorated with dancing cherubs. Toys are scattered across the floor, blocks, dolls, a painted rocking horse. The air smells faintly of milk and lavender soap, soothing at first, though you know both scents conceal risks. A governess sits in a chair near the window, mending a child's dress. She rises politely as you enter, curtsying slightly before resuming her task. On the bed sits Charlotte, the little girl you comforted the night before, her hair neatly plaited, her eyes bright. She greets you with a shy smile. "Mama, will you play with me?" she asks. You lower yourself onto the carpet, and she eagerly hands you a doll. Its porcelain face is delicately painted, rosy cheeks glowing with color. Yet you remember the truth. Those pigments likely contain lead or mercury, toxins hidden behind charm. A child clutching such a toy might press it to her lips, never knowing she embraced danger. Nearby, a tin soldier lies toppled on its side. Painted in vibrant reds and greens, its uniform gleams unnaturally bright. The paints of the period often contained lead chromate and arsenic compounds. One lick, one nibble in curiosity could seed lifelong neurological damage. Victorian children were surrounded by toys that doubled as silent poisons. The rocking horse looms in the corner, its glossy surface inviting touch. Painted crimson and emerald, it is striking and beautiful. But again, the same risk lurks. Lead-based paints flake easily, especially under the curious teeth of children. You run your hand along its smooth back, imagining a child astride it, blissfully unaware of the poison beneath the paint. Charlotte beckons you to join her at a small table set with miniature teacups. She pours imaginary tea, giggling softly. The cups are ceramic, painted with cheerful flowers. But in Victorian times, glazes sometimes contained lead that could leach into food or drink. Even playtime tea sets could poison little ones, turning joy into tragedy. A bookshelf stands against one wall, filled with children's readers and moral tales. You pull one free, its cover a brilliant green. Instantly you recoil. Arsenical pigments were sometimes used in book bindings too, creating vibrant hues that slowly sickened those who handled them often. You slip it back into place, unsettled. The governess looks up from her sewing. Charlotte has been practicing her needlework, ma'am. Would you like to see? She gestures to a sampler lying on the table, half embroidered with letters and a moral verse. Charlotte beams with pride as you examine it. But you notice the strain in her small eyes, the squint as she threads her needle. Children worked in poor light, often developing vision problems early. Yet glasses were stigmatized, particularly for girls, whose beauty was considered a crucial asset. On the mantel sits a small medicine bottle, its label neat, children's soothing syrup. Your breath catches. You know this name. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, one of the most infamous medicines of the era. Morphine mixed with alcohol, given to infants and children to quiet their cries. It worked all too well. Countless children slipped into silence forever, overdosed by the very remedy meant to comfort them. You glance quickly at Charlotte, relieved to see her animated and alive. The nursery window rattles slightly in the winter wind. You notice frost gathering at its edges. Despite the fire in the grate, the room is cold. Children here would wake to icy air, their small lungs struggling. Pneumonia, diphtheria, scarlet fever, diseases you think of as rare today were common killers then. Even the wealthy lost children frequently. The nursery, designed as a sanctuary, was often the setting of heartbreak. Charlotte crawls into your lap, pressing her doll between you. Her small hand slips into yours, warm and trusting. You feel the weight of it, the fragility of this life, the countless unseen threats pressing in from every side. It is almost unbearable to imagine how many parents watch their children sicken without understanding why, powerless against poisons woven into toys, medicines, and even the very air. The governess clears her throat gently. "It is time for Miss Charlotte's music lesson, ma'am." Charlotte pouts but obeys, rising and gathering her doll. You watch as she leaves, her small figure swallowed by layers of stiff clothing and strict expectations. The nursery grows quiet once more. You remain seated a moment longer, surrounded by painted toys and embroidered samplers, feeling the irony keenly. This room, meant to embody innocence, might be the most dangerous place in the entire house. Childhood here was not only short in years but also precarious in safety. You rise finally, smoothing your skirts, and step back into the hallway. Behind you, the nursery door closes softly, leaving its perils sealed within. Yet you carry them with you, an awareness that innocence in the Victorian world was fragile, always shadowed by unseen killers hiding in plain sight. The scent of roasting meat and fresh bread draws you toward the back of the house. A maze of corridors leads you once more past the baize door, into the servants' domain. The contrast is immediate. The elegance of polished wood and patterned wallpaper gives way to plain plaster and the unmistakable aroma of coal smoke, grease, and soap. The kitchen is the heart of the house, alive, noisy, and perilous. A massive black range dominates one wall, its iron doors glowing with heat. Flames roar within, licking at heavy pots and kettles balanced precariously above. The air is stifling, thick with smoke, steam, and the metallic tang of iron. You step closer and instantly feel the danger. A single misstep here could mean burns, scalds, or worse. The cook presides over it all, a formidable woman with rolled sleeves and flushed cheeks. Her arms are powerful from years of kneading dough, lifting pans, and stirring great cauldrons of broth. She barks orders at scullery maids and kitchen boys, her voice rising above the din of clattering pans. The pace is relentless. Meals for a wealthy Victorian household were elaborate affairs, demanding dozens of dishes and endless preparation. You watch as a maid hauls a cauldron of boiling water toward the sink. The pot wobbles dangerously, and steam scalds her face as she strains under its weight. She grits her teeth and carries on. Burns were an occupational hazard here, blisters, scars, and permanent injuries part of the invisible cost of maintaining the household's refined meals. The kitchen table is scarred from years of chopping, pounding, and kneading. A boy chops vegetables with a knife nearly as long as his forearm. His hands move quickly but without precision. One slip and he could lose a finger. No one spares him more than a glance. Injuries were simply absorbed into the rhythm of work. The scullery maid scrubs pans blackened from smoke, her hands red and cracked from lye soap. She works in a cloud of steam that clings to her hair and clothes. Damp air fills her lungs daily, a slow path toward respiratory illness. Her face is pale, her shoulders hunched. The kitchen may feed the household, but it consumes the servants who labor within it. On shelves nearby, jars of preserved fruits and pickled vegetables gleam. They look inviting, but you remember the truth. Many were sealed with lead solder, the poison leaching invisibly into the food. Flour sacks sit open, their contents sometimes bulked with chalk or alum to make bread appear whiter. Even sugar, that prized commodity, was often adulterated with ground bones or plaster. The very ingredients meant to nourish could also sicken. The cook ladles broth into a bowl, offering you a taste. The aroma is rich, savory, irresistible. You take a cautious sip, warming instantly. But even broth could conceal risk. Meat left unrefrigerated spoiled quickly, yet spices or heavy sauces often masked the taste of decay. Food poisoning was a constant, silent guest at Victorian tables. Above the range, copper pots gleam, polished to perfection. They are beautiful but deadly when unlined. Acidic foods cooked in bare copper absorb toxins, slowly poisoning those who ate them. The irony is sharp, beauty and function intertwined with hidden peril. A sudden shout jolts you. One of the kitchen boys drops a pan, and hot fat splashes across the floor. He yelps, clutching his arm where red blisters bloom instantly. The cook scolds him for carelessness, then waves for a maid to smear butter on the wound, a common but useless remedy. There is no time for sympathy. Dinner must not be delayed. The boy bites back tears and returns to work, wounded but ignored. At the far end of the room stands a great wooden mangle, its heavy rollers used to press water from laundry. A laundry maid turns its iron crank with difficulty, her arms trembling with the effort. If her hand slips, the rollers could crush her fingers in an instant. Such accidents were common, yet little protection existed. Machinery was a danger tolerated as necessary. Even the air itself feels unsafe. Coal smoke lingers caught in your throat. The kitchen chimney draws poorly, filling the room with soot. Every breath carries particles that will scar lungs over time. The servants cough occasionally, muffled and ignored. Their suffering blends into the rhythm of knives, spoons, and clattering pans. You notice a tabby cat slinking along the shelves, eyes bright as it hunts for scraps or mice. It meows once, sharp and demanding. Cats were the unofficial pest control of Victorian kitchens, their presence tolerated if not celebrated. Better a cat than an infestation of rats that might gnaw through sacks of flour or spread disease. The cook wipes sweat from her brow and barks another order. Dinner will be hours yet, but the labor will not pause until the last dish is cleared and the last pan scrubbed. You realize with a shiver that this room is both lifeline and death trap. The food that sustains the family and impresses guests is forged here in heat, smoke, and exhaustion. As you retreat toward the baize door, the clatter continues behind you. Voices rise, pans crash, fire roars. The kitchen never truly rests. It is the hidden furnace of the Victorian home, burning bright, burning dangerous, and burning through the bodies of those who keep it alive. After the heat and noise of the kitchen, the library feels like another world. You step into a chamber of quiet authority, walls lined with shelves, heavy curtains muffling outside noise, the air thick with the scent of leather and dust. A fire burns low in the grate, its glow catching the spines of hundreds of volumes. At first, it feels safe, even comforting. But already you know better. Even here, knowledge is not without danger. You trail your fingers across a row of books. The covers gleam in deep greens, reds, and browns. They look stately, scholarly. But the truth is harsher. Many bindings were colored with arsenical dyes, especially that vibrant emerald sheen so fashionable in the mid-19th century. To read too long, to hold such books close, was to risk invisible poison leaching through your skin or dust into your lungs. Knowledge itself could be toxic. You pull one volume free and flip through its pages. The ink smells sharp, almost metallic. Iron gall ink was the standard of the day, durable, permanent, and corrosive. Over time, it ate through paper, and in large amounts it could irritate skin. The letters are beautiful, though curling elegantly across the page. Ideas preserved, but at a cost. On a table nearby lies a stack of papers, case notes in your husband's hand. He is a barrister, you recall, the books and documents evidence of his profession. Each page carefully blotted, each paragraph a world of legal disputes. Yet even here danger lurks. Blotting sand, once used to dry ink, sometimes contained lead dust. Legal work may have sharpened the mind, but it also dulled the body with unseen toxins. A globe stands proudly in the corner, the British Empire painted in sweeping pink. Its lacquered surface shines under the lamplight. But lacquers were often made with shellac dissolved in alcohols, sometimes mixed with lead or arsenic for color. The very object meant to teach geography carried the fingerprints of poison. The desk holds curiosities, a collection of fossils, polished minerals, and small glass jars. You lean closer, fascinated. A lump of cinnabar glows red within its case. Mercury sulfide, beautiful and deadly. A piece of realgar glitters orange, arsenic sulfide. Victorian gentlemen prided themselves on such collections, proof of intellect and refinement, yet they filled their homes with substances that could maim or kill. Above the mantel, two taxidermy birds perch beneath a glass dome, their plumage still brilliant. You shiver. They too were preserved with arsenic soap, handled by taxidermists who sickened from daily exposure. Beauty made permanent at a terrible cost. You sink into a leather armchair, running your hand along its surface. The leather creaks softly, polished to a shine. But Victorian leather was often tanned with chromium salts and treated with dyes that left residues behind. Even comfort hides danger here. Your eyes fall on the gas lamp above the desk, hissing faintly. You imagine your husband working here late into the night, bent over books and papers, the lamp burning steadily. How many lawyers, clerks, and scholars inhaled carbon monoxide without realizing? How many headaches, fainting spells, or sudden deaths were attributed to exhaustion rather than poisoning? The mantle clock ticks steadily, marking time in solemn beats. Even clocks could be hazardous. The luminous paints of later decades, the mercury used in pendulums, the lead alloys in gears. In the Victorian pursuit of precision, danger seeped into even the measurement of hours. Charlotte wanders in quietly, a book clutched in her small hands. "Mama, will you read to me?" she asks, holding it out. The cover is another brilliant green. You hesitate, but her expectant face leaves no choice. You draw her onto your lap, careful to keep the book at a distance, and begin to read aloud. The story is simple, a moral tale of obedience and reward, but her eyes shine as she listens. Her small fingers trace the illustrations, printed in bright pigments that might well contain lead. You gently redirect her hand, aware of the risks she cannot see. Innocence and danger sit side by side in this moment, the joy of a child's imagination and the peril hidden in the very object that feeds it. When the story ends, Charlotte sighs happily and skips away, leaving the book in your lap. You set it aside quickly, wiping your hands on your skirt, though you know it changes nothing. The poison lingers, unseen. You rise and cross to the window, pulling the curtain aside for a sliver of fresh air. Outside, the winter sun struggles through smog, a faint orange glow above chimneys belching coal smoke. Even the air offers little safety. The library is beautiful, yes, rich with wisdom, heavy with history. But you realize with a chill that it is also a mausoleum of hidden killers. Poisons bound in books, toxins preserved in specimens, fumes leaking from lamps. A sanctuary of the mind, built on dangers to the body. You let the curtain fall and glance once more around the room. Knowledge, power, refinement, all displayed here. But every polished surface whispers the same truth. In Victorian life, even the pursuit of learning was shadowed by peril. Evening approaches and the house shifts once again. Fires are stoked, curtains drawn, lamps lit. The air grows heavier with smoke and the faint hiss of gas. A maid guides you upstairs where the master bedroom awaits. It is larger than your chamber, more imposing, a room that mirrors status as much as intimacy. The four-poster bed dominates the space, its carved wood frame draped with heavy curtains. It looks majestic, but the truth whispers beneath its grandeur. The mattress is stuffed with horsehair and straw, lumps forming where years of use have pressed unevenly. Dust and mites thrive within, unseen companions in sleep. Sheets smell faintly of starch and lie harsh on the skin. Comfort was a relative concept here. On the dressing table lies an array of brushes, combs, and bottles. Their cut glass stoppers sparkle in the lamplight. You pick one up, inhaling the scent of lavender. But perfumes and hair tonics of the day were often laced with lead acetate or mercury compounds. Hair restorers promised thickness and shine but delivered slow poisoning. Beauty demanded risk. Your husband enters, his dressing gown belted loosely, a faint smell of tobacco clinging to him. He greets you with formal politeness rather than affection, a handshake of marriage more than a partnership of equals. He moves toward a cabinet and removes a small glass bottle, tipping a few drops into a tumbler of water. You recognize it instantly, laudanum. The opium tincture was a nightly ritual for countless Victorians, prescribed as casually as tea. It calmed nerves, dulled pain, soothed insomnia. It also addicted silently, binding its users in chains of dependency. He drinks it with a grimace, muttering about the day's work. His eyelids already droop, his voice softening. Soon he will drift into laudanum dreams, his mind carried off by the drug. It strikes you that intimacy here is not love but habit, ritualized in chemicals and silence. A maid arrives to assist you in undressing. Buttons slip open under skilled hands, corset laces loosen until at last your ribs expand freely. The relief is immediate, almost painful in its intensity. You wonder how many Victorian women lived with fainting spells, damaged organs, and reshaped bones, all in pursuit of fashion. The nightgown is soft cotton, a small mercy against the day's rigid attire. Yet even here, danger lingers. Laundry whitener sometimes included oxalic acid or chlorine bleach, chemicals that irritated the skin and lungs. To sleep in clean linen was to risk slow harm. The maid turns down the bed, fluffing pillows stuffed with feathers. They poke through the fabric, scratching your cheek as you test them. She places a warming pan, a metal container filled with hot coals, between the sheets to chase away the chill. You shudder at the thought. Many fires began this way, sheets ignited by embers, homes destroyed in minutes. Comfort and catastrophe shared the same tool. When the maid departs, you and your husband prepare for sleep. He snores softly within minutes, the laudanum pulling him under. You lie awake, staring at the flicker of gaslight. A draft rattles the window, sending the curtains swaying. Shadows leap across the walls, alive with suggestion. You cannot shake the sense of danger. The wallpaper glows faintly in the lamplight, its pigments unknown. The air feels heavy, tinged with smoke. Every sound of settling wood reminds you of fire risk. Even the mattress beneath you seems complicit, hiding dust, mold, and vermin. And yet there is beauty too. The craftsmanship of the furniture, the elegance of embroidered linens, the ritual of winding down the day, all speak of a society obsessed with order and appearance. The dangers are invisible, the facade immaculate. You blow out the candle and turn onto your side. The darkness swallows the room, save for the faint red glow of the dying fire. Sleep will come, but not easily. Here in the master bedroom, where wealth and refinement are meant to shine brightest, the hidden killers linger still, woven into fabric, bottled in tonics, burning quietly in the hearth. It is a paradox you carry with you as your eyes grow heavy. In Victorian life, even the sanctuary of the marital bed was shadowed by peril, its nightly rituals a dance between comfort and catastrophe. The morning light filters weakly through frosted glass as a maid leads you to the bathroom. At first, you are surprised such a room exists at all. Indoor plumbing was still a luxury in the 1870s, and even wealthy households often made do with chamber pots and portable tubs. But here, a private bathing chamber has been carved into the home, a mark of modernity, though not without its dangers. The space is tiled in cool stone, the air damp and chilly despite the fire lit nearby. Against one wall stands a gleaming metal tub, oval in shape, with brass fittings that look elegant but crude compared to modern plumbing. Beside it rests a row of porcelain pitchers and basins, stacked neatly on a low table. Buckets of steaming water are carried up by footmen, one after another, sloshing dangerously as they climb the narrow stairs. It takes several trips to fill the tub even halfway. Already the air grows heavy with steam. The maid gestures for you to test the water. It is hot but not constant. Victorian baths depended on manual labor and chance. How recently the kitchen fires had boiled water, how quickly the servants could haul it upstairs. No steady flow from a tap, no guarantee of cleanliness. The water itself is suspect, drawn from a cistern likely lined with lead or from a supply pipe carrying contaminants. London's water in this era often mingled with sewage before reaching homes. Cholera and typhoid traveled invisibly in its currents. Soap rests on a small dish nearby, a coarse yellow block, its sharp odor unmistakable. Made from animal fat and caustic lye, it cleans effectively but burns sensitive skin. Prolonged use left hands raw and scarred, as you've seen in the servants. Beside it, another bar claims to be scented with roses, but its color, an unnatural pink, suggests chemical dyes, perhaps coal tar derivatives. Even cleansing carries risk. Above the washstand hangs a porcelain tooth powder pot and a brush with stiff boar bristles. The powder inside smells of chalk and peppermint, though many such preparations contained abrasive substances or even acids meant to whiten teeth. Enamel wore away, gums bled, but bright smiles were demanded by fashion. You sprinkle a little on the brush and grimace at its sharp grit against your teeth. It feels more destructive than refreshing. A water closet stands in a small alcove, its wooden seat polished to a shine. A pull chain dangles from a tank fixed high above, ready to release water with a rush. It looks modern, even luxurious, yet you know its flaws. Early flush toilets often allowed sewer gases to seep back into homes. Methane, hydrogen sulfide, and other invisible fumes gathered silently, sometimes igniting if a candle or match was struck nearby. The S-trap, invented to block such gases, was still not universal. You glance nervously at the flickering candle a maid has set on the washstand. On a shelf rest bottles of remedies and personal tonics, hair oils, skin brighteners, even an elixir labeled chlorodyne. You recognize the name. A mix of chloroform, opium, and alcohol, sold freely as a cure for everything from coughs to menstrual pain. Addictive, intoxicating, and dangerous, yet trusted by countless households. The very medicines intended to protect health could erode it instead. Steam thickens around you as more hot water is poured into the tub. The air feels heavy, almost suffocating. You imagine slipping into the bath, relaxing perhaps, but risky too. Drowning accidents were not uncommon, especially for women fainting from the tightness of corsets loosened too suddenly. Even if you survived the bath, the water might leave behind a residue of soot, lead, or microbes invisible to the eye. The maid tests the temperature again and announces it ready. You hesitate, suddenly aware that what should be an act of comfort is instead a negotiation with unseen threats. You picture the effort below stairs, the youngest boy carrying scalding buckets, risking burns with each trip. The laundress wringing linens with chemicals harsh enough to burn her skin. The hidden chain of labor and danger that produces a single bath. Instead, you settle for the wash basin. The maid pours steaming water into the porcelain bowl, and you dip a cloth into it. The warmth on your face feels cleansing, though you taste a faint metallic tang in the steam. Lead perhaps, or iron. It is impossible to know. You dry yourself on a coarse towel, grateful for even this small refreshment. When you glance into the mirror above the washstand, your reflection stares back, wavy and distorted by imperfections in the glass. You look strange, out of place, an intruder in this world. The candlelight makes your eyes seem shadowed, your skin pale. You realize that Victorians lived daily with these distortions, not only in glass but in their understanding of health, sanitation, and safety. You leave the bathroom with a strange mix of gratitude and dread. Cleanliness was a virtue here, yet the very systems meant to provide it were rife with hidden dangers. The bath, the toilet, the water itself, all symbols of progress, all potential killers in disguise. By early evening, the household gathers for dinner. A maid escorts you to the dining room, its heavy oak doors opened with ceremonial gravity. The room strikes you at once. Long mahogany table stretching beneath a glittering chandelier, walls lined with dark paneling and gilt-framed portraits, the air thick with polish and smoke. It is not merely a place to eat, it is a stage where wealth and propriety are displayed as carefully as the china and silverware. Each place setting is laid with precision. Plates edged in gold leaf, silver cutlery gleaming under candlelight, crystal goblets catching the flicker of gas lamps. At first glance, the scene radiates elegance. Yet hidden within its rituals lie hazards as pervasive as any found in the scullery. The first course arrives, soup steaming in delicate porcelain bowls. You raise the spoon, noticing a faint metallic taste. Many Victorian glazes contained lead, especially in imported ceramics. Slow poisoning seeped invisibly into every meal. Even the water used for the broth may have carried contamination, drawn from reservoirs fouled by sewage or industrial runoff. As the courses progress, fish, roasted meats, vegetables dressed in rich sauces, you sense the excess. Portion after portion arrives, each heavier than the last. The Victorians believed in hearty eating, yet their diets often led to gout, indigestion, and obesity among the wealthy. Doctors prescribed tonics for weak digestion, while ignoring the root cause. Meals so lavish they overwhelmed the body. Wine flows freely, decanted from bottles sealed with lead foil. You sip cautiously, recalling that alcohol was often adulterated. Cheap wines mixed with additives to mimic age or color, spirits watered down or laced with toxic substances. Brandy, whiskey, port, comforts of the dining table that could mask slow poison. The air itself is heavy with danger. The chandelier above glows not with electric bulbs but gas flames, their faint hiss audible between conversations. Invisible carbon monoxide drifts downward, mingling with cigar smoke as the men light up after the main course. You breathe shallowly, aware of the risk but unable to draw attention to it without seeming odd. Conversation follows strict rules, the men dominating the discourse while women are expected to smile, nod, and contribute only politely. Topics range from local politics to colonial news, reports of the empire's reach, its wars, its triumphs. Beneath the civility lies the unspoken truth. Victorian dining tables reinforced not only health risks but also social hierarchies. Food itself was a symbol of power, abundance displayed as proof of success. You glance at Charlotte, seated beside the nanny near the far end of the table. Her plate holds smaller portions, her movements carefully guided. Children were trained in dining etiquette early, expected to sit still, speak little, and mimic adult manners. A simple spill or lapse in posture might invite correction. The ritual of dinner was not merely nourishment but rehearsal for life within rigid social codes. When dessert is served, an array of puddings, cakes, and candied fruits, the dangers continue. Sugar, abundant from colonial plantations, is piled high, yet few recognize its toll on teeth and health. The bright colors of jellies and confections gleam unnaturally. Many are tinted with dyes derived from arsenic, copper, or mercury. A sweet indulgence today might carry illness tomorrow. Coffee and brandy follow, brought on silver trays. Once again you recall that even these luxuries were suspect. Coffee beans often stretched with chicory or burnt acorns, brandy sometimes colored with caramel laced with impurities. The rituals of excess concealed risks at every level, from the cellar to the table. As the meal ends, the men linger, discussing business and politics. The women rise and withdraw to the drawing room, another division enforced by custom. You follow, corset pressing against your ribs, stomach heavy with food, head clouded by fumes. It is only then, away from the dining room's performance, that you allow yourself a long breath of relief. Behind the grandeur of Victorian dining lay a truth both unsettling and familiar. The very symbols of refinement, fine porcelain, crystal goblets, elaborate meals, were laced with silent killers. Every toast, every bite, every sip carried unseen risks. And yet, night after night, families gathered here, unaware or unwilling to question the dangers built into their rituals of excess. After dinner, the women retreat to the drawing room, leaving the men to linger over cigars and brandy. This division is as much ritual as habit, a visible reinforcement of Victorian gender roles. You enter the drawing room, relieved to escape the heavy air of smoke and gas in the dining chamber, only to find new dangers hidden behind charm and civility. The room is warm and inviting at first glance. A fire burns brightly in the grate, polished mirrors reflect the glow of gas lamps, and upholstered chairs are arranged in clusters to encourage conversation. The walls are lined with patterned wallpaper, its swirling florals elegant yet suspicious. You cannot forget the specter of arsenic dyes that once poisoned countless parlors. Even here, in a room designed for leisure, peril lurks in the pigments. Ladies gather in small groups, voices lowered, discussing charity events, family news, and the latest fashions from Paris. Their dresses rustle with layers of silk and satin, fabrics often treated with toxic aniline dyes. The brilliant blues, purples, and greens are as hazardous as they are beautiful, seeping unseen chemicals against skin and into lungs. Fashion itself has teeth, hidden in every stitch. On a nearby table lies a set of parlor games, playing cards, dominoes, a wooden box of ivory counters for whist. Entertainment in the Victorian home often took these forms, genteel distractions to pass the evening hours. You notice Charlotte, allowed briefly into the room before bedtime, playing with a small puzzle box. Her hands move quickly, but you see her rub her eyes afterward. You recall that many toys of the period were painted with lead-based pigments. Each touch transfers risk, each innocent plaything another hidden killer. A maid brings in a tray with tea and biscuits. The tea's fragrance is familiar and comforting, but the silver pot glints oddly in the lamplight. You wonder whether its solder might conceal traces of lead. The biscuits, perfectly round, carry a sweetness that may hide adulterants, alum to whiten flour, chalk to bulk it out, even plaster of Paris in unscrupulous bakeries. Every bite of supposed refinement could carry illness. Conversation drifts toward the popular fad of spiritualism. One woman mentions a seance she attended the previous week, claiming she heard raps from the spirit world. Another describes automatic writing, the pencil moving across the page as if guided by unseen hands. Even Queen Victoria herself, someone whispers, had once sought comfort from mediums after Albert's death. In this candlelit room, with shadows dancing across the walls, the line between superstition and reality feels strangely thin. To amuse themselves, the group proposes a parlor experiment, table turning, where participants place their hands lightly on a small round table to see if spirits will move it. You are coaxed into joining. The candlelight flickers, the women lean in, and laughter mingles with a nervous thrill. The table trembles slightly under your fingertips. Whether it is trickery, suggestion, or something stranger, you cannot say. What you do know is that the smoke of the gas lamps grows thicker with each passing moment, and dizziness creeps into your temples. Charlotte yawns, and the nanny takes her upstairs to bed. You watch her go, wondering what dreams she will have in her nursery. a room already haunted by invisible dangers in its paint, bedding, and toys. You remain with the women, smiling politely as the seance dissolves into gossip once more. Beneath the laughter and whispered confidences, you sense a quiet desperation. For many of these women, evenings like this are their only stage, their only voice within a world that confines them to the domestic sphere. The men eventually rejoin the group, their cheeks flushed from brandy, their voices louder. The drawing room swells with overlapping conversations, laughter, and the occasional sharp remark. Someone suggests music, and a young woman moves to the piano. Her fingers glide across ivory keys, ivory once prized, now a reminder of imperial exploitation. Each note rings clear, filling the room with sound as intoxicating as the brandy. Yet the gas flames sputter faintly above, and you wonder whether the dizziness in your head comes from music or carbon monoxide. The evening stretches on. Cards are dealt, tea refilled, voices rising and falling in ritual rhythm. Beneath the surface civility lies a world bound by rules. What can be said, how one must sit, when to laugh and when to remain silent. The drawing room is not merely a place of leisure. It is another stage of Victorian performance, where women polish their reputations as carefully as silverware. As the clock strikes 10, you feel fatigue settle over you. It is not merely the day's events but the oppressive weight of this world, where beauty hides poison and leisure conceals hazard. You rise to retire, curtsying politely as you withdraw. Behind you, the voices continue, light and musical, as if nothing dangerous exists at all. Yet you carry the truth with you. Even the drawing room, heart of refinement and grace, shelters invisible killers woven into wallpaper, fabrics, and fumes. The house grows quieter as the hour grows late. You make your way down a dim corridor toward the nursery, drawn by faint sounds, the creak of a rocking chair, the soft hum of a lullaby. When you push open the door, you are met with a scene both tender and troubling. The nursery is spacious but spare, its furnishings designed with Victorian ideals of simplicity for children. An iron-framed bed sits against one wall, Charlotte asleep beneath layers of blankets. Nearby, a wooden rocking horse stands sentinel, its painted eyes gleaming in the lamplight. Toys are scattered across the floor, wooden blocks, cloth dolls, a set of tin soldiers, all objects that appear harmless until you remember their hidden dangers. The dolls' faces are painted with lead-based pigments, the soldiers coated in bright colors that may contain arsenic or mercury. Even the rocking horse, lacquered to a glossy shine, could release toxic dust as it ages and cracks. Each innocent plaything is a hazard in disguise, threatening the very children it was meant to delight. The nanny sits beside Charlotte's bed, mending a small tear in a nightgown. She nods politely when she sees you but says nothing. Her hands are red and chapped from endless washing in cold water and harsh soap. The air smells faintly of coal smoke drifting in from a nearby chimney, mingled with the mustiness of wool blankets stored too long in damp cupboards. You step closer to Charlotte, watching the rise and fall of her small chest. She breathes deeply but unevenly, her skin flushed with warmth. Childhood fevers were common in this age: scarlet fever, diphtheria, measles, diseases that claimed thousands of young lives every year. Medicines were few, often laced with opiates or alcohol, and doctors could do little but wait. A bad cough, a rash, or a fever might become a death sentence overnight. The nanny adjusts Charlotte's blankets, careful not to disturb her. You notice the pillow beneath the child's head, a feather-stuffed cushion that leaks small quills through its fabric. It looks uncomfortable, but the real danger is less visible. Feathers often carried mites and bacteria, unseen companions to a child's restless dreams. On a shelf nearby rests a small bottle labeled Godfrey's Cordial. You recognize it with a chill, an opiate-laced syrup commonly given to soothe crying infants. Marketed as a harmless soother, it dulled pain and induced sleep but often led to dependency or fatal overdoses. Parents and nannies, desperate for rest, trusted it without knowing the risks. How many children slipped away under its influence, never to wake again? The fire in the nursery grate has burned low, casting long shadows across the wallpaper. The design is cheerful, a pattern of flowers and ribbons, but the dyes could contain arsenic, slowly releasing toxic dust as the paper ages. You imagine Charlotte breathing it in night after night, her small lungs vulnerable. Even in her supposed sanctuary, danger seeps from every wall. The nanny rises at last, taking her mending to a side chair. She gestures for you to sit beside the bed if you wish. You lower yourself carefully, smoothing a strand of hair from Charlotte's forehead. Her skin feels hot, too hot, and your stomach knots. In this era, even a simple fever carried terrifying weight. Without antibiotics, without vaccines, parents lived in constant fear of losing their children to unseen killers. You sit quietly, listening to the rhythm of her breathing. It seems steady enough now, though shallow at times. The nanny hums softly, her voice low and weary. You realize she too bears the burden of these dangers. Her own health is at risk from the cold, damp servants' quarters, from the endless exposure to lie, smoke, and fatigue. She may be tasked with caring for Charlotte, but she lives only a step away from illness herself. The clock in the hall strikes 11. Charlotte stirs, murmurs something in her sleep, then settles again. You clasp her small hand in yours, feeling its warmth and fragility. In this moment, the dangers fade, replaced by a surge of protectiveness. You cannot shield her from the poisons in her toys, the toxins in the wallpaper, or the microbes in her milk. Yet you can sit with her, watch over her, and carry the knowledge that her life, like all Victorian childhoods, is balanced on the edge of survival. At last, the nanny urges you gently to rest. She promises to keep vigil through the night as she always does. You rise reluctantly, casting one last look at Charlotte. She sleeps peacefully now, her face softened in the glow of the dying fire. The room looks almost serene, but you know better. The nursery is not only a place of dreams but also of dangers, where every toy, every blanket, every bottle holds the potential for harm. You close the door softly behind you, the sound of Charlotte's breathing still echoing in your ears. In the silent corridor, you understand the Victorian truth. Childhood was never safe. Even in love and care, the hidden killers waited, patient and invisible, woven into the very fabric of a child's world. Long after the family retires, the servants' quarters remain alive with quiet movement. Curious, you follow a back staircase, narrow, steep, and dimly lit, to the top floor of the house. The air grows colder as you climb, drafts slipping through cracks in the roof. At last, you reach a plain corridor so different from the ornate halls below. Bare wooden boards creak underfoot, and the walls are whitewashed rather than papered. This is the world of the unseen, the domain of those who kept the household running yet lived in its shadows. Small doors line the hallway, each leading to a cramped room. You peek into one, a narrow bed with a thin straw mattress, a wooden chest for clothing, and a single chair. The blanket looks worn, patched many times. There is no fireplace here, no warm grate to push back the chill of winter nights. Servants often slept under multiple layers of rough blankets, shivering in their beds when frost crept across the windows. Comfort was a luxury reserved for their employers. In another room, you find two maids preparing for sleep. They nod politely, surprised to see you, but say little. Their hands are red and cracked from scrubbing floors with lye and hauling heavy buckets of water. They sit side by side, mending stockings by the dim light of a candle stub. Matches were expensive, so candles were often burned to the very end, filling the air with acrid smoke. The maids' eyes water as they stitch, but they continue, silent and resigned. Down the hall, the scullery maid's chamber is barely more than a cupboard. She is the lowest in rank, the first to rise and the last to sleep. Her quarters smell faintly of damp stone and coal dust. Her bed is little more than sacking stuffed with straw. On the wall above hangs her meager clothing, worn dresses stiff with soap residue, aprons yellowed from constant use. At her age, perhaps 14 or 15, she should be in school, yet here she is, serving an entire household for pennies a week. The butler's room is larger, located near the stairwell for quick access. His space, though plainer than the family's chambers, contains a small writing desk and a sturdy bed. As the household's most senior male servant, he carries authority over the others but bears the weight of endless responsibility. The stress shows in his lined face and weary eyes. He keeps ledgers on the desk, records of household expenses, coal deliveries, and wages carefully tracked. One mistake could cost him his position and with it, his livelihood. In the basement below, the kitchen maid and footmen sleep in rooms without windows. The air is stale, heavy with the smell of coal smoke and damp plaster. Ventilation is poor, making these chambers breeding grounds for illness. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, and rheumatism were common among servants, who endured long hours of hard labor in environments designed for function, not health. You realize that while the family faces hidden killers in their wallpapers, medicines, and foods, the servants live with dangers born of deprivation. Malnutrition weakens them. Though surrounded by food, they eat the simplest scraps. Burns and scalds mark their arms from endless cooking. Crushed fingers and strained backs tell silent stories of heavy lifting and clumsy mangles in the laundry. Their lives are shortened not by excess, but by ceaseless toil. Yet within these stark quarters, you notice small signs of resilience. A pressed flower tucked into a book. A scrap of ribbon pinned above a bed. A carefully folded letter from home. These tokens speak of hope, love, and endurance, carried like lanterns against the darkness of their world. The clock strikes midnight, its sound faint from the floors below. A hush falls over the servants' floor as candles are blown out, plunging the corridor into blackness. You stand in the silence, hearing only the soft sighs of sleepers behind thin doors. It is a different kind of quiet than in the grand chambers of the family, a silence heavy with exhaustion rather than peace. As you descend the back staircase, you carry with you the truth of the servants' world. They are the unseen backbone of Victorian life, their labor and suffering hidden behind polished silver and starched linens. Their quarters may lack arsenic wallpaper or lead crystal, but the dangers here are no less real. Cold, hunger, fatigue, and neglect are killers just as insidious, claiming lives in slow, grinding ways. The elegance of the Victorian household, you realize, was built on these foundations. On bodies bent over washtubs, hands blistered from endless scrubbing, and lungs choked by smoke. Beauty above, hardship below. Two worlds under one roof, bound together by service and silence. The next morning, curiosity draws you beyond the front door and into the bustling Victorian street. The cold air hits immediately, damp and heavy with coal smoke. It clings to your lungs with each breath, leaving a faint bitterness on your tongue. All around, the city stirs to life. Horses clip-clop over cobblestones, vendors call out their wares, and children dart between carts with shrieks of laughter. At first glance, it feels vibrant, alive with energy. But soon you notice the hidden dangers woven into every scene. The cobbled streets are slick with mud, horse manure, and refuse. Crossing them requires caution. Carriages rattle past at alarming speeds, their drivers cracking whips, shouting at horses, and rarely stopping for pedestrians. A misstep could mean being trampled under iron-shod hooves or crushed by wheels. A street sweeper works nearby, scraping manure into piles. The smell is overwhelming. In summer heat, such waste dries into dust, rising with every gust of wind and carrying bacteria into lungs and homes. Flies swarm above the heaps, potential carriers of disease from stable to kitchen. Public sanitation is minimal. London's sewers are still incomplete, and waste often flows directly into the Thames or open drains along the street. The infamous Great Stink of 1858 may have passed, but the memory lingers in every foul odor that wafts through the air. You pass a row of vendors. One sells pies from a wooden cart, their crusts browned and fragrant. But you recall how Victorian meat pies often included scraps of questionable origin, sometimes even diseased animals. Another stall offers milk poured straight from a jug into customers' pails. Without pasteurization, it may be teeming with bacteria. Worse, unscrupulous sellers sometimes dilute milk with chalk or add borax to disguise spoilage. Children, especially, pay the price with illnesses that sweep entire neighborhoods. The crowd itself is another hazard. Pickpockets work with nimble fingers and scams abound. A group of ragged boys loiter near an alley, one jostling a passerby while another reaches for his pocket watch. Respectable women clutch their handbags tightly, avoiding eye contact with rougher sorts. Crime and poverty press against every wall of the grand houses, separated only by iron railings and social codes. Gas lamps line the street, though they stand unlit in daylight. At night, they transform the city into a patchwork of yellow pools and dark shadows. Yet they are not free from danger. Leaking pipes can fill entire neighborhoods with invisible, explosive gas. Fires are common, devastating crowded districts where wooden structures and narrow alleys create tinderbox conditions. Fire brigades exist, but their equipment is primitive compared to modern standards. You notice children playing with hoops and sticks in the gutter. Their laughter rings bright, but their faces are pale, their clothes patched. Many Victorian children grow up malnourished, their small bodies weakened by long hours in factories or by the polluted air of industrial cities. Childhood diseases, scarlet fever, diphtheria, measles, run rampant. A sudden fever can sweep through families, leaving heartbreak in its wake. A vendor approaches, offering bright green apples. They shine suspiciously, polished perhaps with something more than a cloth. Food adulteration laws are weak, and vendors often enhance produce with chemicals to make it more appealing. You recall that copper sulfate was used to make peas greener, red lead to brighten candy, and sulfur to bleach bread. Each bite could be a gamble. Further down the street, you encounter a rag-and-bone man pushing a cart piled high with scrap metal, bones, and rags. His presence speaks to another hidden threat, the recycling of waste without regulation. Bones are boiled for glue, rags repurposed for paper, and scraps melted down, all in filthy workshops that spew noxious fumes into the city air. Workers in these trades live short, brutal lives, their health consumed by toxic exposure. And then there is the water. A boy pumps water from a public standpipe, filling a bucket for his mother. You remember vividly that Victorian water supplies were often contaminated, carrying cholera and typhoid into every home. Without proper sewage treatment, even clear water could be deadly. The connection between contaminated water and disease is still being understood, and reform is slow to reach every district. You pause at the edge of the street, parasol in hand, watching the swirl of Victorian life. The elegance of polished carriages and silk dresses exists side by side with filth, disease, and poverty. For every wealthy family living in ornate houses, hundreds crowd into damp cellars or drafty attics nearby. The air hums with contradiction, beauty and danger, progress and ignorance. As you step carefully back toward the safety of your house, your boots scrape on the iron boot scraper by the door. You realize it is not merely a decorative convenience but a necessity. Without it, the filth of the streets would follow you inside, dust, manure, and disease carried on every soul. The city is alive, yes, but it is also treacherous. Its dangers are not hidden in wallpaper or corsets, but in the very air, water, and streets that sustain daily life. You retreat inside with a new awareness. Outside the home lies a world just as perilous as within, a constant battle between survival and progress. That evening, your maid informs you that guests will be arriving for dinner. A wave of apprehension washes over you. It seems you are expected to host a proper Victorian dinner party, an elaborate ritual of etiquette, performance, and hidden dangers. Servants bustle about, transforming the dining room into a stage for social theater. The massive mahogany table gleams from recent polishing. Crystal glasses sparkle in the gaslight, each arranged with precision. Silver cutlery is lined up in intimidating rows. Multiple forks, knives, and spoons for each course, each with a specific use. To modern eyes, it feels excessive, but in this era, table setting is a coded language of refinement and social status. You are helped into an evening gown, silk, heavy with lace and beads. The corset beneath squeezes your ribs painfully, making deep breaths almost impossible. On your head, a delicate tiara of jet and seed pearls catches the lamplight. Jet, you recall, is fossilized wood popularized by Queen Victoria during her mourning period. It is beautiful but heavy, tugging at your hair with every movement. The first guests arrive precisely at 8. A footman opens the door, announcing each name with solemn dignity. Ladies in sumptuous gowns and gentlemen in black evening coats file in, offering polite bows and curtsies. Conversation begins stiffly, with careful exchanges about weather, politics, and society gossip. Every phrase is a performance, every gesture measured. A misstep in etiquette could mark you as ill-bred. At last, dinner is announced. Guests pair off, gentlemen escorting ladies into the dining room. You take your place at the head of the table, aware of every eye upon you. A butler stands behind your chair, a silent guardian of propriety. The footmen begin serving the first course, clear soup. You remember to use the outermost spoon, grateful for having observed this earlier. The meal unfolds in carefully orchestrated stages. Soup, fish, roast meats, game, vegetables, puddings, fruit, and finally cheese. Between courses, wine glasses are filled with a variety of drinks: claret, port, sherry, champagne. Each is poured into its proper glass, each meant to complement a specific dish. To refuse wine is impolite, yet to drink too much risks scandal. You sip cautiously, reminded that Victorian wines were often adulterated with lead or sugar of lead to enhance sweetness and preserve freshness. The food itself, while beautifully presented, carries its own hazards. Rich sauces mask the taste of meat that may not be entirely fresh. Fish, transported without refrigeration, can harbor dangerous bacteria. Even the bread might contain alum or chalk, added to whiten it. The most fashionable dishes are often the riskiest. Imported delicacies with long journeys behind them, their safety questionable. Between bites, conversation flows. Guests discuss parliamentary debates, new novels, and the latest inventions. One gentleman speaks excitedly about the telephone, recently demonstrated by Alexander Graham Bell. Another laments the smoke and filth of the city, blaming factory chimneys for the constant fog. The ladies talk of fashion, charity bazaars, and who has recently been in mourning or come out in society. Each subject is approached with politeness and coded phrasing, avoiding controversy while signaling refinement. Midway through, a subtle discomfort spreads across your chest. The corset, tightened for beauty's sake, makes digestion difficult. You shift discreetly, trying not to betray your discomfort. Across the table, another lady fans herself rapidly, pale beneath her rouge. It is not uncommon for women to faint at dinner, overcome by heat, tight clothing, or a sudden wave of dizziness from contaminated food or drink. Servants are trained to respond swiftly, whisking the guest away without disrupting the flow of the evening. The meal concludes with dessert, sweet puddings, candied fruits, and nuts. Coffee and brandy are offered in the drawing room afterward. Men traditionally retreat for cigars and port, while women gather separately for conversation. Tonight, however, the company remains together, discussing art and literature. Someone mentions Oscar Wilde, the rising young playwright, provoking both admiration and scandalized whispers. His wit is dazzling, but his eccentricities unsettle more conservative guests. You find yourself strangely relieved when the evening draws to a close. One by one, guests offer farewells, leaving calling cards to mark their visit. The butler closes the door behind the last of them, and silence returns to the house. You exhale, loosening your posture for the first time in hours. As servants clear the remains of the feast, you reflect on the experience. The Victorian dinner party is more than a meal, it is a performance, a battlefield of manners and appearances. Beneath the glittering surface lies a world of silent hazards. Adulterated food, toxic wine, constricting fashions, gaslit rooms heavy with fumes. Yet it is also a place where social alliances are forged, reputations made, and influence quietly exchanged. You return to your chamber, the scent of roasted meats and perfumes still clinging to your gown. As the maid unlaces your corset, relief floods your lungs. The evening has been survived, but not without cost. Once again, beauty and danger have intertwined, inseparable in this Victorian world. After the exhausting dinner party, you expect the house to settle into quiet formality. Instead, your maid discreetly informs you that several guests will remain for a circle in the drawing room. You quickly realize what she means: a séance. Spiritualism has become wildly fashionable in Victorian society. The death of Prince Albert plunged Queen Victoria into lifelong mourning, and her public fascination with mediums and messages from the beyond has trickled down through all levels of respectable society. Grief-stricken families seek comfort in the idea that loved ones are only a veil away, reachable through mysterious rituals. Tonight, you will witness this phenomenon firsthand. The drawing room has been rearranged for the event. Heavy curtains are drawn tight, shutting out the night. Gas lamps are extinguished, leaving only the flicker of a few candles. Chairs are placed in a circle, a small table at the center. A crystal decanter of water and a silver bell rest upon it, tools the medium will use to summon spirits. Your guests take their seats solemnly, whispering. The air carries a hushed excitement mixed with unease. At last, the medium enters, a thin woman in a flowing black gown, her hair pinned high, her eyes bright with practiced intensity. She greets the company softly, speaking of the thin veil between worlds, how the dead are eager to speak if only the living will listen. You sit stiffly, unsure whether to believe or laugh. The séance begins. Everyone is asked to join hands, forming an unbroken chain around the table. The medium instructs everyone to breathe deeply, to open their minds. Her voice drops low, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The candlelight wavers, casting exaggerated shadows that seem to dance across the wallpaper. For long minutes, nothing happens. Only the creak of chairs, the sigh of fabric, the faint ticking of a mantel clock. Then the medium shudders. Her head tilts back as though listening to an invisible voice. She speaks in a rasp not her own. Is there someone here who wishes to reach the beyond? A woman beside you gasps. She has lost a son in India, she explains, and has longed for a sign. The medium's voice answers in a childlike tone. Mother? The bereaved woman bursts into tears. Around the circle, others lean forward, their skepticism crumbling in the face of grief. The seance intensifies. The table trembles under your hands. A bell jingles faintly, though no one appears to touch it. One of the gentlemen swears he feels a cold hand brush his arm. The medium convulses, her body jerking violently. Some guests murmur prayers, others stare in awe. You struggle to stay calm, reminding yourself of the era's tricks. Hidden wires, accomplices in dark corners, the power of suggestion. Yet in the dim light, the effect is undeniably powerful. Suddenly the candles gutter. For a moment, the room plunges into near darkness. A sharp rap echoes from the far corner, like knuckles on wood. Gasps ripple through the group. The spirits are strong tonight, the medium intones, her eyes rolling back. But they warn of danger in this house. Your heart leaps at the words. Danger? The guests murmur nervously. Someone whispers about arsenic wallpaper, another about gas leaks. The seance has tapped into the unspoken awareness that Victorian homes themselves are riddled with hazards, as deadly as any ghost. At last, the medium collapses, limp in her chair. The seance ends as abruptly as it began. Servants hurry to bring her water, fanning her as though she has narrowly survived a trial. The guests rise shakily, some whispering their belief in what they've seen, others exchanging skeptical glances. Yet all seem unsettled, stirred by the performance. Later, when you retire to your chamber, you cannot shake the memory of the seance. Whether trickery or truth, it exposed a raw nerve in Victorian society, the constant shadow of death. Infant mortality, epidemics, industrial accidents, and domestic hazards mean that loss touches nearly every family. Spiritualism thrives in this world because grief is universal, and the longing for connection is desperate. You blow out your candle and lie back against the pillows. The house groans in the wind, shadows shifting across the ceiling. For a fleeting moment, you wonder, in a place where arsenic, gas, and disease lurk unseen, are ghosts really the most frightening thing the Victorians faced? The morning after the seance, a note arrives with your breakfast tray. Mrs. Henderson, your neighbor and tireless organizer of charity work, requests that you accompany her on a visit to a local hospital. The cause: bringing comfort to the sick and inspecting conditions for a potential donation. Reluctantly, you agree. Curiosity outweighs dread. A carriage takes you across the city, wheels rattling over cobblestones, hooves clattering in the damp air. The smell hits you before the building comes into view, a pungent mixture of disinfectant, unwashed bodies, and sickness. The hospital itself is a gray stone structure, imposing but grim, with narrow windows that let in little light. Inside, the air is heavy. Corridors echo with groans, coughs, and hurried footsteps. Nurses in starched uniforms move briskly, their faces pale with fatigue. You quickly notice the contrast between Florence Nightingale's vision of cleanliness and the reality before you. Though efforts at reform have begun, many Victorian hospitals remain dark, overcrowded, and unsanitary. Mrs. Henderson leads you into a large ward. Rows of iron-framed beds stretch to the far wall, each occupied by a patient. Some are gaunt with fever, others wrapped in bandages that already seep through with blood. The air is stifling, no proper ventilation, only a few small windows cracked open against the chill. You pull your shawl tighter, wishing for distance from the coughing, the smells, the suffering. A doctor in a frock coat approaches, tipping his hat politely. His hands are bare, stained faintly with dried blood. No gloves, no sterilization, only a brisk confidence. He speaks of his patients with detached authority, using terms like consumption for tuberculosis, ague for malaria, and dropsy for heart failure. Germ theory, though gaining traction thanks to Pasteur and Lister, is still resisted by many physicians. Disease in their minds often arises from miasmas, bad air, rather than bacteria. You watch as he tends to a man with a mangled leg, the result of an industrial accident. The wound is cleaned with carbolic acid, a harsh disinfectant that burns as it sterilizes. The man cries out, his voice echoing through the ward. Surgery in this era is crude and terrifying. Anesthesia exists, but supplies are limited and dosages are unreliable. Chloroform or ether might send a patient under, or stop their heart entirely. Many still undergo operations with only alcohol or grit to dull the pain. In another bed lies a young girl, her chest heaving with labored breaths. The doctor whispers diphtheria. Without antibiotics, there is little hope. Treatments involve tracheotomies, bleeding, or experimental serums. Parents often watch helplessly as children suffocate, their throats sealed by the disease. You feel your stomach not as you picture Charlotte, healthy now but living in a world where such dangers lurk at every corner. Mrs. Henderson, accustomed to these visits, moves briskly, distributing baskets of food and knitted blankets. A little comfort helps, she explains. Indeed, for many patients, charity is the only source of relief. Hospitals are seen less as places of healing and more as last resorts for the poor. The wealthy prefer private doctors and home care, however flawed, rather than risk exposure to hospital conditions. You pause near a bed where a pale woman clutches an infant swaddled in thin cloth. The baby's eyes are dull, its tiny body weak. Milk sickness, the doctor explains, caused by contaminated cow's milk. You remember the borax and chalk, the lack of pasteurization, and feel a surge of anger. So many deaths, preventable if only they knew what you know. The ward matron passes, her face stern but kind. She speaks of her constant battles. Too few nurses, too little money, endless shortages of clean linens and fresh water. She proudly mentions Nightingale's reforms, better ventilation, hygiene, record-keeping, but admits progress is painfully slow. Tradition and ignorance resist change. As you leave the ward, you glance back at the rows of suffering patients. The image will haunt you long after you return to your comfortable home. For all the dangers hidden in wallpaper and gas lamps, the true peril of the Victorian world lies in its fragile grasp of medicine. Disease sweeps through homes, factories, and cities unchecked, cutting lives short with terrifying ease. Back in the carriage, Mrs. Henderson chatters about the charity bazaar, the flower arrangements, the need for donations. You nod absently, your thoughts still trapped in the hospital's dim corridors. Wealth and privilege shield you from much, but not all. Illness spares no class, no household. The dangers you have seen today remind you that even the grandest home cannot keep death from crossing its threshold. The morning after your hospital visit, the household carriage is readied once again. This time, the destination is Charlotte's school. Though many upper-class children are taught at home by governesses, your Victorian family seems to value a more formal education. You decide to accompany Charlotte, curious to see how Victorian schooling compares to your modern expectations. The building itself is a stately brick structure, its arched windows and tall spire designed to inspire both reverence and discipline. Inside, the atmosphere is austere. Long corridors echo with footsteps. The air smells faintly of chalk dust, ink, and the damp wool of children's coats hung on hooks along the walls. A stern-looking schoolmistress greets you. Her hair is tightly pinned, her dress black and severe. She bows slightly, addressing you with proper deference, but her eyes are sharp, watchful. She leads you into a classroom where rows of desks stretch in neat lines, each equipped with a slate, chalk, and a battered reader. The children, dressed in stiff uniforms, rise to their feet when you enter. "Good morning, ma'am," they recite in unison, their voices clipped and mechanical. You sit quietly as the lesson begins. The teacher drills the students in arithmetic, her voice sharp as she calls on each child. Mistakes are met with a rap of a cane on the desk, a constant reminder of Victorian discipline. Corporal punishment is not just accepted but expected. Obedience and silence are prized above curiosity. The children's faces reflect it, tense, serious, a few openly fearful. Charlotte sits near the front, her posture rigid, hands folded neatly. She answers correctly when called upon, her French pronunciation precise, her arithmetic quick. You feel a strange pride but also a pang of sorrow. This is not education as you know it, it is conditioning, a relentless shaping of children into obedient adults. The hazards of this environment soon become apparent. The air is stuffy, windows closed despite the number of children crowded together. Tuberculosis, diphtheria, and measles spread easily in such conditions. The cough of a boy in the back row draws no special notice, though it echoes ominously in the enclosed space. In an era before vaccines, Every classroom could become a breeding ground for epidemics. The children work with slate pencils and dip pens. The ink is iron gall, a common Victorian formula that can corrode paper and stain skin. Their fingers are already smudged, some children's cuticles raw from constant cleaning with harsh soap. When asked to recite passages from memory, they stand stiffly, eyes downcast, voices monotone. Any sign of individuality is quickly corrected. The curriculum itself is revealing. Boys focus on mathematics, Latin, and sciences, subjects meant to prepare them for professions, the military or university. Girls like Charlotte study music, embroidery, French, and scripture, designed to make them accomplished, but not independent. Education for girls is not about knowledge but about marketability in the marriage economy. During a break, you step outside with the schoolmistress. She speaks proudly of the discipline and moral instruction offered here. "We shape character," she declares, "for what is knowledge without virtue?" Yet you notice the worn shoes of many children, their red chapped hands, their subdued spirits. You wonder how many of them will survive to adulthood, and of those, how many will escape the rigid path society has laid for them. Outside, the playground is little more than a yard of packed dirt. A group of boys play with hoops while girls walk arm in arm, whispering quietly. There is laughter, but it is restrained, as though joy itself must be managed. The air carries the acrid scent of coal smoke drifting from nearby factories. Even recess is shadowed by the era's hazards. When lessons resume, you observe the use of readers. Textbooks filled not just with language exercises but with moral tales reinforcing obedience, thrift, and piety. Stories warn against idleness, dishonesty, and disobedience, painting dire fates for children who stray from proper conduct. Fear is as much a tool of instruction as knowledge. As the school day ends, Charlotte emerges with her classmates, her face pale but composed. The nanny arrives to escort her home. You linger a moment longer, reflecting on what you have seen. Education here is both a privilege and a hazard. It offers literacy and discipline, but at the cost of individuality, health, and sometimes even life itself. The carriage ride home is quiet. Charlotte stares out the window, her gloved hands folded in her lap. You wonder what she dreams of, whether she longs for freedom, for play, for a life beyond strict lessons and rigid expectations. But in Victorian society, such dreams are rarely encouraged. The hidden danger of the schoolhouse is not just disease or punishment, it is the quiet extinguishing of possibility. Not long after your visit to Charlotte's school, Mr. Wallace suggests you accompany him on an inspection of a textile mill. As a barrister with interests in local industry, he has business with the factory owner. Curiosity, again, outweighs hesitation, and soon you find yourself climbing into the carriage beside him. The city streets give way to an industrial quarter, the air growing thicker with soot and the steady thrum of machinery. The factory looms ahead, a massive brick structure with tall chimneys belching smoke into the already gray sky. Even from a distance, the noise is overwhelming, a deep, relentless roar of gears, belts, and hissing steam. Inside, the atmosphere is worse. The air is hot and damp, filled with fibers and dust that catch in your throat. Rows upon rows of looms clatter ceaselessly, worked by men, women, and children alike. The floor trembles with the rhythm of machines. Overseers in waistcoats stride between the rows, shouting orders over the din. What shocks you most are the children. Barely taller than the machines they tend, some no older than 6 or 7, they dart between moving parts with nimble fingers, tying broken threads, clearing jams, carrying bobbins. Their faces are pale, their eyes heavy with exhaustion. Many are barefoot, their small feet blackened by grime. One boy coughs violently into his sleeve, the sound swallowed by the thunder of the looms. Mr. Wallace greets the factory owner, a stout man with a booming voice who seems proud of his enterprise. "Progress," he declares, gesturing at the rows of machines. "We supply half of London's cloth. And these children, so industrious, so quick with their fingers. It builds character." You glance at the children again. Their movements are indeed quick, but their faces are blank with fatigue. You recall the reports of accidents. Fingers lost to gears, limbs crushed by falling machines, scalps torn when hair catches in moving belts. Compensation, if any, is minimal. Families often depend on these meager wages no matter the risks. The factory air is stifling. Ventilation is poor, windows few. Lint and fibers swirl visibly in the light, coating every surface, entering every lung. Mill fever, the workers call it, respiratory diseases from constant inhalation of dust. Tuberculosis spreads easily here, cutting lives short before adulthood. A shrill whistle blows, signaling a break. Workers slump onto benches, eating meager meals of bread and cold tea. The children sit apart, some too tired even to eat. You notice a girl of perhaps 9 with a bandaged hand, her fingers stiff. The overseer notices your gaze and shrugs. Caught in the loom last week. She'll heal well enough. Lucky it wasn't worse. Lucky. The word feels bitter. You wonder how many of these children will grow to adulthood without scars, physical or otherwise. Mr. Wallace and the owner retreat to a quiet office, leaving you to wander. In a side room, women sort raw cotton, their arms white with dust. Their skin shows rashes and sores from constant exposure to chemicals used in bleaching and dyeing. The dyes themselves are often toxic, arsenic greens, mercury reds, seeping into their pores as they work. Another room houses the boiler. The heat is unbearable, the hiss of steam constant. Accidents here are catastrophic, explosions that can kill dozens in an instant. The workers tending the boilers are gaunt and sweaty, their eyes bloodshot from constant strain. As the day drags on, the whistle blows again. Work resumes without pause, the machines roaring back to life. 14-hour days are standard, 6 days a week. Children collapse from exhaustion only to be prodded back to their tasks. Discipline is strict. Lateness or mistakes bring fines, sometimes physical punishment. When you finally leave, the relief is overwhelming. Outside, the air is cold and smoky, but at least it is breathable. The factory owner shakes Mr. Wallace's hand, boasting of profits and progress. Mr. Wallace nods gravely, but you notice the flicker of unease in his eyes. Even he cannot fully ignore the human cost. Back in the carriage, you sit in silence, the images seared into your memory, tiny hands working between iron teeth, coughing children hunched over looms, women with skin raw from chemicals. Progress, yes, but bought with lives measured in years stolen and health destroyed. You think of Charlotte and her classmates, shielded by privilege from such fates. Yet for countless Victorian children, the factory is their schoolroom, their playground, their prison. The hidden dangers here are not arsenic in wallpaper or gas leaks in parlors, but the grinding machinery of industrial progress itself, relentless, indifferent, and deadly. The carriage ride home from the factory feels unusually quiet. The clamor of machinery still echoes in your ears, the images of pale children and exhausted workers lingering behind your eyes. Back in the safety of your Victorian home, you settle into the drawing room, its fire burning cheerfully, its furnishings gleaming in candlelight. Yet now you see everything differently. The wallpaper, with its elegant floral design, no longer looks beautiful but threatening, its dyes a possible source of poison. The gas lamps flickering on the walls seem less like marvels of modernity and more like silent assassins, capable of suffocating an entire family in their sleep. Even the gleaming silver tray a servant brings to your side, tea and biscuits, carries hidden dangers. Is the tea adulterated with iron filings? Are the biscuits bleached with alum? You realize that in this world, danger lurks not in dark alleys or stormy seas but in the ordinary. The bed you sleep in, the corset you wear, the toys in a child's nursery, all are touched by invisible hazards. The Victorians do not know this. To them, these are signs of comfort, wealth, and progress. And perhaps that ignorance is what allows them to carry on. But you, with modern knowledge, cannot unsee it. Each luxury seems edged with peril, each advancement a step taken blindly into risk. And yet, amid the dangers, you also feel a strange admiration. The Victorians lived with courage, with resilience, with a determination to maintain order and beauty in a world that could be cruel and short. You think of Charlotte, practicing her needlework in the dim classroom light, her small fingers stitching letters with quiet determination. You think of the factory children, their lives spent at looms, robbed of play yet still capable of laughter in snatched moments. You think of the hospital ward, where suffering is met not with despair but with stoic endurance, and of the seance, where grief-stricken families cling to hope of voices from beyond. The Victorians endured because they had to. Their hidden killers were many, but so was their will to survive. They embraced new inventions, new medicines, new fashions, even when these turned out to be deadly. They were builders of empires and dreamers of progress, their faith in advancement unshaken by the tragedies along the way. You walk to the window and part the heavy curtains. Outside, the fog rolls across the street, glowing faintly under gas lamps. A hansom cab rattles past, its driver hunched against the cold. Somewhere in the darkness, a constable makes his rounds, his boots crunching on the damp cobblestones. The city breathes, alive with contradictions, glittering wealth and grinding poverty, breathtaking progress and hidden peril. Your breath fogs the glass. You think of your own time, of smoke detectors, clean water, pasteurized milk, vaccines, and consumer protections. Safety nets woven from generations of hard lessons. The modern world has its own dangers, yes, but you live with safeguards the Victorians could scarcely imagine. And then, like a tide pulling you back, the awareness returns. This is not truly your life. It is a dream, an immersion into another age. The weight of the corset, the smell of coal smoke, the clatter of horse hooves, all of it begins to fade. Slowly, the flickering gas lamps blur into the steady glow of modern electric light. The rattle of carriage wheels transforms into the hum of distant traffic. The Victorian drawing room dissolves, leaving only the familiar contours of your own bedroom. You sit up, dazed, surrounded by clean walls, safe furniture, filtered air. Relief washes over you. No arsenic in the wallpaper. No lead in the paint. No coal dust in your lungs. No children working at looms until their fingers bleed. You are back in the 21st century. And yet, you carry something with you: perspective. The Victorians were not ignorant fools. They were people doing their best with what they had, building lives and families in a world where danger was everywhere, yet rarely understood. Their hidden killers became the foundation of modern safety. Every regulation, every health reform, every scientific advance was written in their struggles. As you lie back in your safe, clean bed, you feel a profound gratitude. For filtered water and inspected food. For medicine tested before it reaches your hands. For schools where children learn freely instead of laboring in factories. For homes that protect rather than imperil. The dream of the Victorian home lingers in your mind, its beauty, its order, its elegance. But so do its dangers. And in that contrast lies the lesson: progress is not free. It is purchased by those who lived and died before, those who unknowingly bore the cost so that future generations might sleep safely. Your eyes grow heavy, your breath deepens. As sleep returns, it carries no fear this time. Only gratitude, and the quiet knowledge that you are safer than almost any Victorian could have dared imagine.